They were first-generation Americans, and they taught me a lesson that I'm taking through my life and also into this campaign. You don't complain about a problem or finger point. What you need to do is get out there and work hard. That's what I've done in economic development, job creation, helped folks create hundreds of jobs, helped train thousands of workers in buildings in the area to make sure they had the skills that we need for the future, and most importantly, was always a problem solver who would work with both Democrats and Republicans to listen to folks, work hard, and deliver results.
And thank you, Ms. Gillen. And Mr. Kaiser.
Hi, my name's Dave Kaiser. I'm a very private individual who entered probably the most public arena you could possibly imagine. You're probably asking yourself why. I just got sick and tired of the federal government impeding on my private life, and everyone that I talk to. There's just an enormous overreach on the part of the federal government. I also looked at the state. We have 1 million people that are going to be represented by one person, and I would feel that it would be just a little arrogant to say that one individual can truly represent everybody. And so I have established a campaign that I'll ask you, the voters, to be engaged in well past November 6th. A few things about my opponents. Tonight I will demonstrate to you that in their commercials they have misled you. And also recently this summer that both of them sided with their political contributors instead of the voters of Montana. And I thank you very much for inviting me here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaiser. And now we turn to the formal question portion of our program. Sherry.
Thank you. Clearly the biggest issue in this year's national and statewide votes is the economy and its impact on jobs and the earnings of every American. As Montana's sole representative in the U.S. House, what will you do to create jobs for Montanans? What will be your specific legislative proposals to bolster job creation, earnings, and the economy? And we'll go first to Ms. Gillen.
Thank you. Well, as I have traveled around the state, it's clear that everyone is concerned about the economy, and they're also concerned about the gridlock. It really is impossible, particularly in Montana, to talk about good-paying jobs in the economy without talking about some other important initiatives and investments that we need to continue to make. That is in education. We need a well-trained and educated workforce. We need to make sure we continue to invest in our infrastructure, roads, bridges, broadband, and all those things that help large and small businesses in Montana succeed. We also need to continue to invest or focus on innovation and collaboration. There's no simple way to create jobs, but I know from my 20-plus years of practical as well as policy experience that you can create good-paying jobs if you focus on small businesses, helping them cut red tape, and also helping them have access to capital. What is troubling to me is that my opponent, Steve Daines, is supporting a budget, the Ryan budget, that does actually the opposite. What it does, it slashes millions of dollars from Pell Grants and other important education programs that would have particular impact. Here in Montana, where almost 50% of our students not only get Pell Grants, but they qualify, because that means they're from low-income families. Investing in education and innovation and not supporting a budget that simply continues to provide tax incentives, unfair tax incentives, to companies that ship jobs overseas. Let's change our focus and focus on the companies, the individuals in the United States who are going to use our talent and make sure they create jobs for the future. I think the strategy we need to do is work with Republicans and Democrats instead of starting from the extremes, and find a way that we can get the economy back on track.
Thank you. Mr. Kaiser.
We have a government that is just way too corrupt. There's over 100 departments within the federal government whose sole responsibility is transportation paving. They've got 6,000 employees in the Department of Transportation. They've got 10 different departments that distribute the funds. I just was at the ribbon cutting event in the Bitterroot in Victor, a project that should have taken 6 years, took 25 years because of government red tape. I think if we take all the waste, all the duplicate services out of the federal government, we'll save an enormous amount of money. And then also with regulations that are dated back to the 40s, 50s, 60s, we can eliminate them and let businesses do what they do best and not be impeded by the federal government.
Thank you, Mr. Daines.
Well, I've spent the last 28 years as a job creator, the last 12 in Montana here, creating high-paying jobs. I can tell you the 3 things that were impeding our growth in speaking with Montanans across the state. Number 1 is a very complex tax code that's 11,000 pages thick that has tremendous amounts of inputs from lobbyists and special interest groups. We need to move towards a flatter tax code and a simpler tax code here and provide certainty there versus these expiring tax codes that we have today. We're facing that here in January with different tax rates coming forth. Second, we need to reduce and remove some of the overreach of regulations coming from our federal government. In fact, just this past week, we saw the news that the PPL is shutting down the Correct plant, mothballing it in 2015 as a result of onerous regulations. That's 35 jobs, that's $3.2 million of tax revenue to Yellowstone County. They're going to be lost. And third, we've got to attack the $16 trillion debt. This creates tremendous uncertainty. We have countries like China now that we owe $1.1 trillion to. And so it's going to take some broad, comprehensive, bipartisan support to get that done. But these are big, big issues. The clock is ticking, and we need to get to the people's work here soon back in Washington.
By way of follow-up, I'd like to hear from each of you one specific legislative proposal, a piece of legislation that you would introduce that would create jobs here in Montana. Why don't we start with you, Mr. Kaiser, and we'll just work down the row.
I'd like to see no new spending. Every single bill that comes out of the House, you stay within budget, and if you're going to create a bill that has spending, it's got to be matched by cuts. We can't grow the deficit. And then start eliminating all the duplicate services. The country could save $500 billion by just getting rid of duplicate services. I mean, we have hundreds of people that do the same identical thing within Washington. There's 436 data centers. They could have one. That would save $328 billion over 10 years.
Okay. Ms. Gillen, one specific legislative proposal to create jobs in Montana.
In Montana, small businesses are the economic engine. I think it's 95% of our businesses have less than 10 employees. We need to invest in upgrading the skills of our workers. That's the way that we will continue to be competitive, continue to be productive. We are competing with a global economy, and in Montana, by 2018, 62% of the jobs will require workers who have some post-secondary education. It is imperative for our small businesses and our large businesses that we have a well-educated and well-trained workforce. So let's put together a 21st century workforce training program, have matching grants, and invest in our employees so they can continue to have the skills that will allow Montanans to compete, whether they're here or across the world, and not reward folks who ship jobs overseas.
Mr. Daines?
Yeah, I think we have a great example right here in Montana with what happened with the PPL. And I'd like to see a piece of legislation that would take regulations that have more than $100 million impact on our economy to make sure they have congressional approval and oversight. The concerns I hear as we travel all over the state, whether we're talking to farm and ag producers, whether we're talking to those in the energy industry, small business owners, again, is this overreach of regulations. I think it'd be a tangible thing we could do here that could help restore some confidence in this uncertainty of the regulatory environment we live in today.
Thank you.